The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Welcome to the public engagement session around our 2020-21 budget. We will start with roll call. Beth, if you could help us with that.
Good evening. McCoy.
Here.
Shelton.
Here.
Becker.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Vanden Heuvel.
Here. Rhonda is excused for tonight because of a work commitment, so 6 of the 7 board members are present. With that being said, we will get into our first agenda item, opening remarks around our budget. Just as a reminder, the process tonight is a part of the state process by state statute on how we pass our budget, and part of that is having an opportunity for the public to weigh in. So the purpose tonight is not for the board to discuss the budget, but to be accessible to anybody who wants to speak to us about the presentation. We did have a lengthy presentation from Pete Ross and Angie Robley last week, and they have a little bit more information to share with us today. And then we will take anyone who is registered to speak and listen to their comments tonight. So with that being said, Steve, do you want me to hand it to you, or are we ready to go right to Pete and Angie?
As I say, I'll be real quick. Just as you said, just a reminder that this is a part of the process that we will be back in front of the board at the meeting next week for the final 2 components. Tonight's opportunity is to hear from the general public. And as you said, we've got just a short update from Pete and Angie. So off you go.
Great, thanks Josh for loading the PowerPoint. This will be somewhat similar to what the board has already been shown with respect to the impact on the local tax base. Angie and I would normally not do the presentation if there were no persons that showed up at that. This is public engagement, but we decided we would run it through it anyway for the record, so that there would be that as a record and would be archived. So you can see what we have left with respect to the process on the first slide. Josh, if you go to the next slide. And again, we want to make sure that we are focused on the mission statement and what the board has already chosen to do with respect to the programs that we have and the employees that we have hired. Those are reflected in the budget. And so really what the board is doing now is setting the levy, and that's what we're involved in. Next slide, please. We're doing everything with respect to state statute in terms of having the public listening session, which is tonight, as well as a public hearing, which will be next week, and then the adoption of the levy. The board has already seen the budget in its preliminary form, and last Thursday and Friday, we've got confirming numbers from the state. So there'll be some slight changes that we'll be presenting next Friday, or next Monday rather, at that public hearing and the budget adoption. And tonight we'll just do referendum impact from the 2017 referendum as the agenda, tax levy information as far as it's going to impact the local tax base, and estimates and assumptions that we're now placing into the budget. We'll have to correct myself at the last board meeting. I have always used raising taxes as a way of the school district collecting money to do its operations, and I've got to not use that term because the levy is actually going down as it has been going down the last 4 years, and we'll continue that process. Next slide.
As many of you know or are aware, on April 4th, 2017, the voters did approve a facilities and operational referendum And with that, at the time, the board did make a commitment and a promise to the taxpayers that we would not raise the tax rate, wouldn't increase, I guess, once we pass that referendum. And we've held that promise. The finance team, business services office has worked really hard to make sure that we can support the board in that commitment to the taxpayers. And we have actually decreased that levy slightly over the past few years. The referendum that we had passed had allowed the district to direct resources to many things: educational programs, lowering of class size, and also staffing across the district. Next slide, please. So the referendum enabled the district to close that gap between its revenue limit and the state average. And the district's commitment to the taxpayers at the time that the referendum was passed, the levy was at $10.16. And we are now proposing in the 2021 school year, recommending a mill rate of $9.79.
And this slide represents, how the mill rate is actually calculated. It's with respect to the property taxes that the board would levy and has the authority to levy. You are a very low spending district, and you are in this budget and the proposed budget that we have in front of the board going to that low levy or low spending limit in order to set the levy. And you divide that by your total fair market value of all of your assessed property within the district, and that is your mill rate. The property value increase did occur, and it happened to be 4.89%. And it would say also that it might be as a result of some property reevaluations that go on throughout the district from year to year, but it also could be because of added value of property that's been constructed or built within the district. So what we're simply saying with the levy increase of 2.99%, the total levy is increasing at that rate. Because the property valuation increase is faster than what the levy increase is, the mill rate actually will have to go down. And as a result of that, if you have a property that was worth, $150,000, a typical home in the Green Bay School District a year ago, and your assessed valuation hasn't changed, your taxes actually will go down because the mill rate that's attached to that property is a lower mill rate than it was last year. And we've decreased the mill rate in each of the last 4 years successfully. In fact, we have the lowest mill rate that we've had for 9 years in the district. Next slide. Here's an example of the calculations that we go through with the Department of Revenue from the state of Wisconsin. They give us our evaluations of all of the municipalities within the Green Bay School District where property resides within the boundaries of the district. We get a proration then calculated based upon the valuations of each of those municipalities and the percentage that they impact the district. And you can see the city of Green Bay obviously is the largest by far of all of those valuations. And then that distribution is then given to each of those municipalities to tax at that mill rate of 9.79. Next slide.
So this slide kind of shows you, our mill rate history over the last 9 years. So, it kind of looks like there's peaks and valleys, but really if you look at the actual amounts of the levy, we're right around, around that $10 mark. And now, coming in at $9.79 this year. But that's really what you want to see with a school district and being fiscally responsible for their taxpayers is you want that levy to remain fairly steady throughout the years. And Green Bay has definitely shown that they've done that. And again, coming in a little bit lower than last year, about 18 cents. And this graphic really shows some key points or highlights of the 2021 budget. This year, we're proposing a balanced budget for the general fund of $290.1 million. Like Pete said, this is the lowest mill rate in the last decade, coming in at proposal of $9.79. The average property value change this year was 4.89% across the district. And then another highlight this year is the amount of federal and state funding that the school district is going to benefit from, in the amount of about $8 million coming from the CARES Act, and then also GEAR, which is state funding in response to COVID-19 and the pandemic, to cover those costs that were unexpected, not in our budget, that we've definitely faced in this time of crisis. Next slide.
And this slide is put in to show the public the tax levy comparison by fund. And you can see that the mill rate established to our general fund to fund the basic services within the school district of education, by far the lion's share of what we spend is in Fund 10, or what we could consider our general fund. That mill rate is 7.38%, which is down from the year before, primarily due to the fact that the school district received $165 million aid promise from the state of Wisconsin when our aid was certified. So we had a huge increase, millions of dollars increase in our aid appropriation from the state of Wisconsin, and that's primarily what's driven down the Fund 10 mill rate. You'll see the Fund 30 mill rate is actually creeped up a little bit. The reason that is the case is we're advocating for advanced funding of our some of our long-term debt obligation as a way to save the taxpayers an enormous amount of interest. And as those numbers are more fully known and we go forward with that in the spring, we'll be bringing forward to the school board the savings, and it will be multiple millions of dollars as we've done in the past. Doing that actually puts the district on a great financial footing for the future, and everything that we do with respect to the mill rate and the strategy around the mill rate is really designed to keep the mill rate flat for the taxpayer, so that there's no surprises where you have an increased mill rate years down the road that becomes a surprise to a taxpayer, and we're doing everything that we can do to avoid that. Next slide. And again, just to reiterate, we had final certification of aid, final certification of enrollment numbers, final certification of voucher numbers that came to us on Thursday and Friday last week, and we're putting those numbers currently into the budget, and there's very little adjustment that was needed with respect to aid. Our aid estimate was only $41 off on $165 million of aid. We were very accurate. Where we did have some adjustment that was necessary within the documents of the budget, and we'll describe those more in detail on next Monday, was that we had fewer voucher children than we had estimated. So it seems like the voucher number seems to be leveling off in the district, and we had an estimated increase in the voucher numbers that didn't pan out. We also, just as a FYI for the board and for those that might be on listening, we had a slight reduction in the number of open enrollment out students, and we had a slight increase in the open enrollment ins, which combined with the fact that we had fewer voucher children than we had estimated, ended up being a good positioning for the school district going forward. And I believe that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that recap, Pete and Angie. Really appreciate that. That being said, we'll move on to the public participation section of the agenda, the public forum. Want to remind everyone that I think we have one person that's registered to speak. Any questions that come up, we have the contact information for the one person in this instance who's registered. So the board is not able to interact or answer questions on the spot, but certainly any questions that are raised, we will follow up with after tonight's meeting. So with that being said, Josh, you've got us ready to go.
Calling out right now.
Thank you. Hi, Brooke, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, this is Eric Vandenhoevel with the Green Bay School Board. Thank you for calling tonight. if you could start by introducing yourself and giving us your address, and then you'll have 5 minutes to address the board.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Brooke Andrews. I live at 3150 Outing Court in Green Bay. I first wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to share my opinions about the budget for the up-and-coming school year. At a time when most of us are limiting our expenses, it appears that the Green Bay Area Public Schools are poised to increase expenses almost 10%, going from $266 million to a proposed budget of over $290 million. All this while more than 20,000 students sit at home and 42 schools sit idle. I've spoken to many parents and teachers, and the consensus has been that virtual learning isn't working for our kids. Sure, they're getting by, but in my opinion, their education is being compromised with this delivery method. This isn't a reflection on them or their effort any more than it is on the teachers. It's just simply hard to learn this way. If it were widely agreed, if it were widely regarded as the best way, we would have made this change long ago, but I digress. I'm curious that there is no mention in the budget of the savings we are seeing from keeping students, faculty, and staff out of our schools. What we are saving in not allowing children to participate in athletics and other extracurricular activities. What is the dollar amount that we as taxpayers can expect to see defrayed in next year's budget based on those savings? My guess is there won't be, as much of what I've touched on are contracted services. So in the end, whether the kids are in school or not, we still pay to operate the schools, buses to get the children to and from, the trash collection that is virtually unnecessary. I'm choosing to look at schools as a business. Through that lens, as a parent and a resident of Green Bay, I'm both a customer and a shareholder in this business. As a shareholder whose tax dollars go towards school funding, I'm furious at the thought of wasting millions of dollars on costs for services we aren't using. As a customer, I'm even more irritated that my children are not only missing out on the level of education that they would receive in person, but they're missing out on the opportunities associated with extracurricular activities. I'm envious that the neighboring districts have opted to open their doors and allow in-person learning. I'm angry that despite overwhelming support for in-person learning from students and parents alike from the surveys conducted prior to school starting, our opinions were ignored. I'm incredulous that the district has the nerve to ask for additional funding for next year while dollars are being wasted this year. At the end of the day, as a parent of 2 children in the district, I am left with 2 choices. 1, to look into options to enroll my children into neighboring communities allowing in-person learning, or 2, simply accept whatever I'm given by Green Bay Area Public Schools. As a Green Bay resident, however, I do have another option to ensure my voice is heard. I have always felt that a good public school system tends to increase property values. As such, when measures have been put forth requesting additional funding for school, I've always supported them. Having kids that go to one school or funnel to a particular high school has never kept me from supporting referendums for other schools within the district. However, when I see fiscal irresponsibility from the administration, and when my children are being disenfranchised and our voices are falling on deaf ears with the board, I can't honestly say that I will unconditionally support future school referendums, and I doubt many parents watching their kids suffer like this feel much differently. I challenge the board to conduct another survey regarding the desire to move to an in-person learning structure, to share the results publicly, and to implement educational delivery methods based on the results. What is the harm in opening 75% of the schools? We're already paying to operate all of them. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brooke. Appreciate you calling in. All right. Just want to verify that we didn't have anyone else register to speak.
No, that was our only speaker.
All right. With that said, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, passed 6-0, and that is the end of our public engagement session.
Thank you all
Thanks.
for attending tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.